So now this is the division section. We are doing the problem 625 divided by 8 with both the scaffold method, and long division. Okay, so with scaffold method, they're kind of going to be set up the same to start. So with scaffolding, we are going to put the 8 out here. Sorry, I know my hand's kind of blocking it, but I'll move it in a second. Draw that line, and then we're going to draw 625 in there. So that's kind of what you want to start the problem. So essentially, this is different than long division. We're not trying to, we don't have to go first number. We're just trying to find the easiest way. So just multiples of 8 that you could go into 625 to get it down to the lowest number. Now, you could do this with any sort of numbers. I like to personally try to find the biggest numbers I can to go in to try to make the process a little bit quicker. So, thinking about this, 100 is going to be too big. That's going to be 800. 800 is more than 625. That's not going to work. So, like 8 times 5 would be 40. And then so 8 times 50 would be 400. I think we could do a little bit better. 8 times 8 is 64, so 8 times 80 would be 640, too big. So 8 times 7 is 56. So, and luckily, 8s, like multiples of 8, are something that I memorized, so I don't have to write it down. But 8 times 7 being 56, so 8 times 70 being 560, I think is the closest we're going to get, or at least the biggest I'll go. So we'll write 560, right like that. So that's kind of what we're looking like. So since 8 times 70 is 560, we're going to write the 560, and we're going to be subtracting that from the 625, and then we're going to write 70 out here, so we're keeping track of how many 8s we're using. So 5 minus 0 is going to be 5. 2 minus 6 you can't do, so you're going to you're going to take from the 6. So we're going to make that a 5, carry a 1. So now we have 12 minus 6, which is going to be 6. And then 5 minus 5 is 0. So we're left with 65, so that's pretty good. And then off the bat, the first thing I think of, 8 times 8 is 64. That's pretty close, so I think that's the best we're going to do, because we're not going to be able to make another group of 8. So I'm going to go ahead and write 64, and then we're going to write 8. So there's a similar thing. We have 8 times 8 is 64. We're keeping track of how many groups of 8 we used, and then we're subtracting the 64. So 5 minus 4 is 1. 6 minus 6 is 0. So we're left with 1. We can't make any more groups of 6, so this is essentially where we're good to stop. So for our answer, we're going to add these numbers on the outside of the line. So 70 plus 8 is going to be 78. And then we have an extra one that we can't group into any more groups of 8. So our answer is going to be 78, remainder 1. That's kind of what we're looking at. So 625 divided by 8 is going to be 78, remainder 1. Now, moving on to long division, which is how I grew up doing it. Kind of set up the same, but kind of not. So I'll just show you. So we're still going to have the 8 on the outside, the 625 inside, but we're just not going to have that line. Now the difference is we are not just finding any number that can go into 625 with the 8, any number of groups of 8, doing all that. We actually have to work left to right. So 8 and 6. 8 can't go into 6. 8 is bigger than 6, so that's not going to work. So we have to move on. So 8 into 62. So, like I said before, 8 times 8 is 64. That's too big. It's not going to work. So we go to the next one. So 8 times 7 is going to be 56. Alright, so since we know that, we're going to go ahead and subtract the 56 from the 62. 2 minus 6 we can't do. We're going to have to take from the 6, make that a 5, and carry the 1. So now we have 12 minus 6. That's going to be 6. And then 5 minus 5 is 0. So we're left with 6. So this is how we know we did it right. If you can subtract your number and you cannot make another group of 8, that's how you know you're doing it right with long division. Because essentially you want to get to the closest you possibly can and not be able to have any more groups, and that's kind of how that differs from the scaffolding method. But so now we have 6, so we're going to bring down the 5 from the 625. So we're left with, how many times can 8 go into 65? Luckily, these are multiples of 8, and they're similar to the problem above. So 8 times 65, 8 times 8 is 64. Again, 64 is the closest we're going to get to 65 without, it's just the closest we're going to get without going over 65. So we're going to write 8 up here, and then since 8 times 8 is 64, we're going to write it down here. And then so 65 minus 64 is 1. So there's nothing else to bring down, and we're only left with 1. So we can't make any more groups of 8. So this is where we stop. So our answer to 625 divided by 8 is going to be 78, remainder 1. And then those are kind of how you do the scaffolding and the long division methods, and we got the same answer, so I think we're good.